That was still working.
There we go.
There we go. Good morning, everyone, and happy New Year. The January 5th, 2022 meeting of the Board of, I gotta get used to saying 2022, meeting of the Board of Estimates is now called to order. In the interest of promoting health and safety as we continue to deal with COVID-19 pandemic, the Board of Estimates continues to meet virtually. At this time, I'll ask our amazing Comptroller, Mr. Bill Henry, for any corrections, additions, and noted abstentions to today's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are no changes or corrections to today's agenda. No additional protests were received for today's meeting. The following item is being withdrawn. Page 68, item number 4, Bureau of Procurement, B500066147, Lead Risk Assessment Services. A protest was received from ARC Environmental LLC. The following items are being deferred until January 19th at the request of the Council President. Pages 68 to 69, item number 5, Bureau of Procurement, B500066206, Procurement Assessment and Transformation. Page 70, BBMR, Appropriation Adjustment Order number 13. Page 71, BBMR, Appropriation Adjustment Order number 15. Page 72, BBMR, Appropriation Adjustment number 14. Pages 73 to 74, BBMR, Appropriation Adjustment Order number 16. The following items are moved to the non-routine agenda. Page 10, Department of Law, Settlement Agreement and Release. Page 11, Department of Law, Settlement Agreement and Release. Page 49, Office of the Comptroller, Status Report Presentation, Department of Planning, Biennial Performance Audit Findings. Pages 64 to 65, item number 12, Bureau of Procurement, Contract number 06000, Master Lease Agreement Program. Pages 97 to 98, Department of Human Resources, Elected Officials Salary Increase. Pages 99 to 100, Department of Human Resources, Minimum Wage Increase. No items are being moved to the routine agenda. The following abstentions have been received by the board. The Honorable Mayor Brandon Scott will be abstaining on pages 36, item number 2, Health Department Agreement with the Johns Hopkins University. Pages 36 to 37, item number 3, Health Department Agreement with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Pages 99 to 100, Department of Human Resources, Elected Officials Increase Mayoral Salary Only. The Deputy Director of DPW, Matthew Garbark, will be abstaining on page 89, Personnel Environmental Control Board. We have no votes and no rejection of recommended awards. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. I now would like to direct the board's attention to a memorandum from our office dated January the 3rd, 2022, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items, together with any corrections and additions that have been noted by our Comptroller. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve all items contained on the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
This item has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of approving this item, all the items on the non-routine agenda, on the routine agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda is now adopted. The first item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 10, Department of Law, Settlement Agreement and Release. This is a settlement in the amount of $99,000 to resolve a lawsuit brought by the ACLU on behalf of a number of plaintiffs. The lawsuit alleged the violations of the plaintiff's constitutional rights stemming from a so-called spy plane pilot program. On behalf of the law department, we have Deputy Solicitor Ingram to walk us through the settlement. Deputy Solicitor, the floor is yours.
Good morning, honorable members of the board, Mayor Scott, President Mosby, Comptroller Henry. At this time, the law department requests the Board of Estimates to approve the settlement in the amount of $99,000. This is a matter of the Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle versus the Baltimore City Police Department et al. This agreement is stemming from an allegation from the plaintiff, the leaders of a beautiful struggle, regarding the Baltimore Police Department approval through the Board of Estimates, execution of a professional service agreement between PPT and a private contractor for the purpose of conducting a 180-day pilot of aero investigation research program. Subsequent to the board approval, the ACLU filed a lawsuit and a motion for a preliminary injunction on the basis of violation of the First and Fourth Amendments of the citizens of Baltimore via the plaintiff, the leaders of a beautiful struggle. This matter was litigated in district court, federal district court, where the plaintiff sought a preliminary injunction. This matter was litigated up into the Fourth Circuit for appeal twice, and on the second appeal to the Fourth Circuit en banc panel, the court reversed and remanded for further proceedings, including the entry of the preliminary injunction. And so based on those circumstances, the law department is requesting that this matter be resolved to pay the attorney's fees regarding this lawsuit in the amount of $99,000. And it's for the best interests of the city. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you, Deputy Solicitor Ingram. At this point, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of approving this particular item, please say aye.
Aye.
No, all those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. On to our next item. On non-routine agenda, it can be found on page 49, Office of Comptroller, Status Report Presentation, Department of Planning, Biennial Performance Audit Findings. This continues a series of presentations.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
excuse me. I think we have another settlement on page 11 on the non-routine agenda.
Yeah, got you. All right, we'll jump back to that.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Comptroller. The biennial performance audit findings. This continues a series of presentations the board began in December, where agencies have been asked to come and update us on their progress in implementing recommendations and correcting findings in their biennial performance audits. At this time, I would like to recognize Director of Department of Planning, Mr. Chris Ryer, and his team. Director Ryer, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, President Mosby and Mayor Scott and Controller Henry and the board. I have here on the call also Cheryl Kashani, who's the head of community planning and revitalization, and Lisa McNeely, who's the director of the Office of Sustainability. And I'm going to try to share a presentation here. Hope you can see this. We had comments, audit comments on 2 of our services. Finding number 1 was service 763, which encompasses the community planning and revitalization division. And the performance measure concerns the amount of time, the amount of days to review urban renewal permits. And the performance measure is 3 days, and that has been exceeded by roughly 4 days in the past in this particular area. So we have revised the performance measure validation form. For the vast majority, I will say, the approved, Cheryl Kashani went through and looked at all of these, the permit history for the last year and a half, so month by month. And we found, as I hope you realize, that the vast majority of permits were completed. 90% were completed within the 3-day window. However, 10% were not. And the reasons are several. One, I want to note that the permitting system in Baltimore is quite antiquated. It was designed in-house, the CTE system, and sometimes the planners do not get the automated notification that a permit has been referred to them, and they don't find out about it until somebody complains. Typically, the applicant will call and say, "Why are you holding this permit?" And then they act immediately. So I do want to point that out. Department of Housing and Community Development has a proposal into the recovery fund, I think, for roughly $3 million to overhaul the entire permit system. As I said, it was developed in-house. The person or persons that developed that are no longer with the city, so it is increasingly hard to operate. In fact, as you may know, we have a group of new planners, and just getting the system to give them permission to review permits is a very time-consuming process. However, some of the other reasons for permits being on hold, this 10%, are as follows. One is some urban renewal plans, these are urban renewal permits, have a community review panel. That means the planner is required by the ordinance to refer it to this community review panel. This can take as long as 4 weeks. They typically have a 4-week window to review it. We also, you may remember, a lot of the urban renewal plans are older. Much of their content has been duplicated by the new zoning code that we passed in 2017, but we still have to, unless the plan has gone, unless it's been rescinded, we still have to go by the old urban renewal. And that includes design guidelines, various regulations, including landscaping, the next 3 categories here. So we may have to ask the applicant to submit something to meet these requirements, and then we wait for them to submit it, and then we approve it. So that can delay a percentage of them. And then finally, outside the urban renewal process, some properties are sold to applicants through the vacant to value process, and there are stipulations attached to that sale, and we have to wait, talk to HCD, make sure that they are abiding by those stipulations, and then we can approve the permit. So some examples are, and this can show you the sort of how minor they are sometimes. One example, design permit was put on hold because their renewal plan restricts front yard fences to 48 inches, and the permit included plans for a 6-foot fence. That sounds like a really minor thing, but if the applicant, we have to contact the applicant, they have to revise the application, send it back in, all that can take a number of days. Another example is, I talked about the vacant to value example. Here's a property in Harlem Park that was sold with the stipulation that it be used as a single family property, and the application was for a residential care facility. I think I got a third one here. Yeah, the Lauraville business. This has a fairly stringent community review process, and they're all volunteers. So the planner forwards it to the community review, and they have 4 weeks to make a recommendation. You know, the worst case scenario sometimes is they don't respond with a recommendation, they respond with a question, and then you have to answer the question and go back and forth. So that really concludes the reasons for the holds. As I said, it's only about 10%. Some of them we will not be able to fix until we replace the permit system. But we have revised the performance measurement form to reflect hold dates and what is going on with a hold date. So you will see the performance measure improve because of this modification. We've also I started out by saying that the division chief went through back 2 years almost and looked at all these different permit stories, and so that recommendation was accomplished. We also changed the approval dates within the permit system to reflect the date of approval, and we implemented password security so nobody could go in and change the recommendation dates and sort of falsify the data. And then finally, the second recommendation was for Service 765, which is where the Office of Sustainability lives. Again, remember, this goes back a year, so these have all been implemented since the recommendation. The first one was to develop annual targets and report annual activity for the period. So we've done that. We weren't doing them on an annual basis before. And the second was to prepare and maintain data that supports the recommendations. This is with regard to reduction of greenhouse gases and the aggregate outcome of the plan. And again, it wasn't collected on an annual basis that mirrored the budget process, and we now do that. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And we also, as I said, have Cheryl and Lisa on the call.
Thank you, Mr. Director. At this point, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? I see the hand of Comptroller Bill Henry. At this point, I'll yield the floor to you, Comptroller Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Director.
Good morning.
So the 20 audit found a repeat finding that planning, and quoting here, did not meet its targets for the number of preliminary reviews completed for tax credit applications within 30 days during FY 17 and 16. Management acknowledged that there was an oversight in making the change with BBMR to report the measure as a percentage, and will work with BBMR to make that change. But in the most recent budget book, there isn't a change. So what is the timeline for this recommendation to be implemented?
You're talking about CHAP permits here, and I don't have the CHAP director, but my recollection of that was that there were two reasons for that problem. One was ransomware, and the second was we had a cluster of employees, a high percentage of employees out on maternity leave. Those were the reasons in that particular year.
For why the target wasn't met, or why BBMR didn't change your targets?
Or why the target wasn't met.
Okay, so all right, but I guess maybe this is, if this is something that's going to have the CHAP director provide details, then if you could get information back to the board about what the timeline is to have BBMR make the change in the budget book.
Certainly, yeah.
Okay. All right, that's all that I have for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this point, are there any other questions or concerns from other members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, we will note this presentation. Thank you, Director, as well as your team, for coming on and working with us through this.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Back up on the next item, it can be found on page 11, Department of Law Settlement Agreement and Release. This is a settlement in the amount of $8 million with the estate of Mr. Malcolm Bryant. The underlying lawsuit alleges that Baltimore Police Department employees improperly withheld exculpatory evidence in a murder investigation, which led to Mr. Bryant wrongfully imprisoned for over 17 years. Again, on behalf of the Law Department, we have Deputy Solicitor Ingram here to walk us through this settlement. Deputy Solicitor, I yield the floor to you.
Good morning again, honorable members of the board, Mayor Scott, President City Council Mosby, and Comptroller Henry. The Law Department is requesting the Board of Estimates to approve the settlement in the amount of $8 million. This is a matter of the estate of Malcolm Bryant, the Baltimore Police Department. This incident occurred on around November 20th of 1998, where a male assailant accosted two teenage girls in the 1300 block of Hartford Road. One of the teens was stabbed multiple times, resulting in her death, and the other teen that was assaulted survived and was an eyewitness to the incident. In this matter, the plaintiff was identified via the second team that survived the incident of being identified. However, plaintiff has alleged that that identification was erroneous and that the utilization of the computerized sketch and some other numerous tips that were regarding another plaintiff, regarding another defendant, could have been the assailant. Plaintiff alleged that the Baltimore Police Department did not do its due diligence in identifying additional suspects to exclude the defendant. In addition, the plaintiff is asserting and alleging that the testing that was utilized to provide exculpatory evidence for the plaintiff was also not was the evidence that they could have used could have provided his innocence, in that during the time one of the analysts they are alleging did not perform the appropriate testing, because in his assertions during trial was that the human blood samples were used up or consumed. Plaintiff has asserted that assertion was erroneous. However, the city is objecting to that as well, because during that time, the technology is different as of today. However, there was a BOLD technology group, I call BOLD, where they conducted DNA analysis after the fact in 2011. And the assertion that at the time the analysts indicated that the blood samples were consumed, they have indicated that it was not consumed. However, there was enough samples to exclude the plaintiff. In addition, they said there was additional samples on the clothing of the victim, and based on those two, this analysis, this what I call BOLD, they indicated that there was enough evidence to exclude the plaintiff, the state of Mr. Bryant, from being the assailant. In addition, plaintiff has asserted that he had an alibi and that he was in another location during the time, and that they're asserting that the Baltimore Police Department had knowledge of that but did not further investigate. The plaintiff, the plaintiff, the state of Mr. Bryant, the plaintiff was eventually convicted of the crime and served 17 years. However, a year after he was released, the plaintiff passed away, and his at the time of his conviction, he had two young sons. The state attorney's office, in conjunction with BOLD, did an investigation, and subsequent to the investigation, the state attorney's office decided to drop the charges against the plaintiff. And the plaintiff has asserted that the city, Baltimore Police Department, violated his constitutional rights, including but not limited to many counts, which were 42 U.S.C. 1983, that BPD employees regularly failed to turn over exculpatory evidence, in addition to violate his due process, the 5th and the 14th Amendment, in addition to malicious prosecution and a conspiracy to deprive his constitutional rights and any other state claims. Subsequent to his release, again, as I indicated, plaintiff passed away. And so the parties conducted an investigation, the discovery, and based on, in the best interest of the city has decided to settle this matter in the amount of $8 million. And with that, I open up the floor for questions.
Thank you, Deputy Solicitor. At this point, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board to the Law Department or the Baltimore Police Department? Hearing and seeing none, at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Thank
Move approval.
Mr.
Mr. Comptroller, do you have something to add or ask?
I just wanted to say that it's not technically a question or really a concern. I got a very good briefing from the Law Department on the details of this, and while I understand that there are facts in dispute in this case, I don't think anybody disputes the fact that this was a tragic situation. And so I just wanted to offer my condolences to the family of the plaintiff, and I hope that our actions today provide them with a measure of closure.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller, for that. At this point, are there any additional questions, concerns, or comments? Hearing and seeing none at this point, the board will entertain a motion to proceed.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is approved. On to the next item on our routine can be found on page 64 through 65. It's item number 12, Bureau of Procurement, contract number 6,000, Master Lease Agreement Program. This is a companion to an item that was approved by the board at our last meeting to approve the purchase of replacement helicopters for Baltimore Police Department's fleet. This item would amend the city's master financing agreement to include that process. On behalf of Baltimore Police Department, we have Deputy Commissioner Cherie Briscoe, as well as Ms. Michelle Graham. Deputy Commissioner, the floor is yours, or anyone else from Baltimore Police Department that would like to proceed.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. My name is Charlotte Graham. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Baltimore Police Department, and Happy New Year, everybody. I'd like to begin by sharing a very brief presentation, if that's okay. Okay, so we're here today, as you mentioned, sir, to discuss the helicopter replacements. The purchasing was approved in December, and we're here today to talk about the financing of the helicopters. So in the summer of fiscal year 2021, or last year, 2021, we went forward and we did a request for information. It went out to over 40 companies to inquire about the helicopters replacement. Of that, only 2 vendors got back to us. One of the vendors had already gone through a competitive process through the federal government, through the Government Services Administration, which a law enforcement agency is allowed to pull down from. So that was the vendor selected, and of course it was the best price as well. So we are considering financing 3 helicopters. You might ask, well, we have 4 helicopters today. Why are we only considering replacing 3 helicopters? And the reason for that is we wanted to be financially responsible. We know that it's tough times right now with the economy. So the Baltimore Police Department discussed with operations if we could scale back our fleet to 3 helicopters, which is what we're doing. The purchase not to exceed $17.9 million, and it's mentioned that was approved by the BOE last year. But that is not actually the purchase price. The purchase price will be reduced further by the trade-in value of the current fleet. The reason why we can't give you an exact number on the trade-in value is it's subjective to the evaluation at the time. And as you know, our current fleet is in use, so it's being used on a daily. So the reduction will be not just for the planes themselves, but the parts too. And in the summer, when the first helicopter is being close to taken out of service, there will be an evaluation for the helicopter's condition, the number of hours, and the condition of the market at the time. And that will then determine the reduction that we'll get for the trade-in. And this is the current helicopter fleet. The current helicopter fleet is aging. It's nearly 12 years. The first helicopter, Foxtrot 1, will reach 12 years the end of this year. And you might ask, why is that important? Well, at 12 years, there's a major overhaul of the helicopters, or they can no longer be flown because it's a safety issue and it's required by the FAA. And at that point, they will not be serviceable by the Baltimore Police Department. And actually, the airplane and the parts themselves have been discontinued by the manufacturer. So in order to continue the current level of service, the Baltimore Police Department has to replace the helicopters. BPD has actually stretched out the replacement of these helicopters. The money was first put in our budget in fiscal year 2019, but due to the challenges ahead with the budget, we've kind of delayed this as much as we could so that we could find offsets for the city. So we're now at the point that we're against the clock, that we have to replace the helicopters so that we can have a replacement for when the Foxtrot 1 comes out of service in November of 2022, which is when it reaches the 12-year mark. You know, they are considered by BPD as a critical service. They do many things. They assist in arrests, carjackings. And at this point, if it's okay with you, sir, I'd like to turn it over to operations. And we've got Colonel Jones, and he can discuss a little bit about the value of the helicopters to the operations.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. Before we turn it over to Colonel Jones, just specifically as it relates to the current contract and any specific questions for Ms. Graham, are there any questions or concerns from the board regarding the 2 or 3 slides we just said? Hearing and seeing none, thank you, Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm just I guess this would technically be a question for Ms. Graham. I think I pulled the answer out of what you already said, but I just want to ask it explicitly to be sure. So will the police department be asking for a budget increase in FY23 to pay for and maintain the new helicopters? Or is this going to be something that's going to be absorbed as a current level of service?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we have part of the money in the budget. We have half of the money in the budget. We did take a reduction on that to help offset with the challenges with COVID. So we are working with the budget office right now to talk about the 50% that we need to be added to the budget and how we can add that to the budget for fiscal year 2023. We do have nearly $1 million in fiscal year 2022 for this. However, we will need about another $1 million to make the debt service payments. The first payment will not be due till next fiscal year 2023.
So if the first payment isn't due until fiscal 23, you don't have to use any fiscal year 2022 funds for this entire deal.
That's correct. Yes, and if it would be obviously BBMA's decision, but we could roll over the money that we do have in our budget right now.
Okay. And I think I saw this on one of your slides, but just to confirm, what's the total annual debt service for the length of this? Fine. Okay, there it is.
Yes, it'd be $19.8 million with an annual debt service payment of 1.98. Again, though, once we have the trade-in value of the helicopters, the total purchase price would be reduced.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Comptroller. At this point, are there any other additional questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, we're going to turn it over to you, Colonel. The floor is yours to go over the operations associated with the helicopters.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Council President, members of the board. So the utilization of the Foxtrot or the helicopter unit for Baltimore Police Department, it's a force multiplier. So we know that, airborne law enforcement assist us, often referred to as a force multiplier because of the ability it gives us in aerial support. So it gives us command and control when we're dealing with anytime that there is a large crowd, a civil disorder, anytime that there is a natural disaster, anything that we may need aerial support where units cannot get to or there are cameras that are not available. It helps us in vehicle followings and pursuits that, based on our policy, where there are limitations for mobile units on the street. These high-speed pursuits that are a constant thing that sometimes the city has, the aerial support provides us a safe measure of looking over from a bird's eye view of the location of these vehicles and the recovery of same. It helps us during traffic, during those hazardous incidents. It helps us with fire and assist the Baltimore Fire Department in reference to locations that they can see the rooftops and where there may be backfires in reference to fire officer safety and where they should do water suppression, as well as officer safety. There has probably been, not probably, a year to date in reference to the calendar year of 21, there was 177 signal 13s that the aerial unit responded to. Search and rescue measures, as well as the aerial support in reference to coverage that enables the flight crew to locate suspects who may usually escape from ground units, that this unit provides those resources. It also helps in reference to special events when dignitaries may come to town, and also as reference to homeland security. So a large portion of the aerial units daily, day-to-day per shift is infrastructure. They're hitting a lot of the watersheds, the commercial targets, industrial targets, and the harbor and the port. To include one of them, for instance, would be the chlorine plant that's right on Ray Street in the Southern District, that's right by the stadium. So these infrastructure checks are paramount in reference to not only the safety of the city, but the safety of the citizens in reference to Baltimore. So I have some rough numbers in reference to how it supports us, but the aerial support team is invaluable, especially in a time where we're dealing with resource shortages because of COVID and other things. This is a force multiplier that can do the work of tens of thousands, well, not tens of thousands, but hundreds of officers at one time, and provides us a safe layer of aerial support and surveillance in reference to many critical incidents that may occur within the city limits.
Thank you, Colonel Jones. Does that conclude your presentation?
It does, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Colonel. At this point, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Colonel.
Good morning, sir. How you been? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. In one of the briefing slides, I had seen the distinction of there's the base cost for the helicopters, and then there's an additional cost for law enforcement configuration, which is a substantial number. I would say comes close to doubling the cost of the individual helicopters. Can you give the board some details of what those specifications encompass that create a law enforcement configuration?
Yes, sir. So though when it has the law enforcement package, it pretty much brings the base helicopter up to the technical specs that it needs to be in aerial support for law enforcement. So we're talking about 7 different radios inside of the helicopter, because now we have to be able to speak with our allied jurisdictions just in case they may come into the city or we may need to go to them, because we do have reciprocity with other jurisdictions when their airships are down. Just like when ours is down, they come to help us. So we have to be able to speak to those other jurisdictions. So there's 7 radios for that. We have our LPR systems. We have our FLIRs.
Sorry. I'm going to ask you to watch out for acronyms.
So the LPR system is our license plate readers. So we have the mobile license plate readers that are stationary at certain locations throughout the city. We have the mobile license plate readers that are equipped to our vehicles, and they are constantly scanning cars for the tags to see stolen, carjacked, all of these things. And Foxtrot is now able to also do that. So when something pops up, they can quickly respond to that area to provide assistance. So all of the technical things that the ground officers have, Foxtrot has to have it as well as the LoJack system to track those and recover those vehicles. So everything that's within that law enforcement package is necessary to make the optimization of the helicopter. If not, it would just be a helicopter in the air.
If there's a really long list of lots of little things, could you share that with our office? Because I mean, I appreciate the concept that there's a lot of stuff that makes up a law enforcement package, but I know it's got to be a lot more, because 7 radios and a license plate reader isn't going to be $2 million.
No, sir. I would work with the aviation unit to break that down, as well as with Charlotte to give you the specs and everything. Yes, sir.
That would be great. Thank you very much. And I don't know whether or not this is more of a question for you or for Ms. Graham. Do you have projections on how much you're going to end up spending in-house to operate and maintain the helicopters? And is this going to involve paying overtime for operations or maintenance?
So I will speak, and then Charlotte can back me up. I do know that there is a portion of the maintenance and training that comes with the purchase price, but there's also maintenance that is done in-house by the aviation unit themselves. What exactly the breakdown cost-wise is, I am not sure, but I know that there is half and half. There's some training and maintenance that is provided with the purchase, but there's also in-house maintenance that is done that's going to be the cost-saving mechanism, because it comes with the training of those aviation and flight unit officers.
Yes, that's correct. So the training is included in the purchase price. There will still be required preventative maintenance by the Federal Aviation Administration that has to be done regardless, and that is budgeted for. I think what we'll see, though, is the unplanned maintenance cost decreasing since we've got a newer fleet.
Okay. Actually, I was just really impressed that that worked for the first time, where I was looking at Colonel Jones, and then when he stopped talking, I turned and looked at Miss Graham, and she started talking. And usually I need to be in the same room with people for that to work. So that's great. I think that is all I have on my list. I think everything else that I was going to ask about was already included. How do these helicopters compare in size to the ones that they're going to be replacing? I appreciate the idea that you're replacing a four vehicle fleet with a 3-vehicle fleet. But how do these compare to the ones that are being replaced? I guess that's for Colonel Jones.
Yep. So it is a larger airship. It is a more powerful airship that allows us to stay up a little longer. We're going from basically a 4-seater that has been outdated. They're no longer retrofitting 4-seaters to more of a bench model, which allows at least 6. Not that we would do 6, but it provides them the extra power in reference to that law enforcement package. So it keeps them in the air longer. It's a stronger, faster vehicle, which is necessary because of the specs that is required for law enforcement and in reference to all of the needs that the unit would have. But I can provide you the specific specs compared to the ones that we have, sir.
So would that include any new type of equipment or technology that's being used in enforcement activities as a requirement of the consent decree?
I do not know that answer offhand, sir. I will follow that up.
Okay, because under the consent decree, whenever the BPD is acquiring any new type of equipment or technology, that has to be disclosed to the public on its website, the type of new equipment or technology that's sought, and the BPD's intended use of the equipment. So will that be done for these helicopters for anything new that's being added?
Yes, just like any other thing, it will be, if it's a consent decree mandate, it will be the same thing for the aerial unit as well as anything else. Anything outside of what we already have based on Judge Bedard and the consent decree, anything newer technology would definitely have to meet those standards, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
At this point, are there any other additional questions or concerns from members of the board?
Mr. President.
Deputy Director Garbuck, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to mention very quickly that the Air Fleet also is instrumental in helping the Department of Public Works with monitoring water main breaks and additional breaks that might happen in a vicinity that we don't necessarily see. So it helps us get there quicker. And very importantly, in an environmental setting, when there are illicit discharges that can discolor the harbor or other waterways, the air unit is able to help spot those quickly so that we can get crews out there and contact the Department of Environment. So I just wanted to add those 2 benefits as well to the air unit and how they support the utility.
Thank you, Deputy Director Garbuck, for that addition. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board to Ms. Graham or Colonel Jones? Hearing and seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval.
I second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who are opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is now approved. The next item on non-routine agenda can be found on pages 97 through 98. Department of Human Resources elected official salary increase. The board is being asked to note that these costs are living adjustments, which were set forth by state and local law and do not require board approval. On behalf of the Department of Human Resources, I would like to recognize Director Quentin Herbert to go through the process and explain how we got here. Director Herbert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, other distinguished board members. As you rightly articulated, sir, state and local law requires that there's an automatic rate increase of 2.5% for elected officials, including mayor, council president, comptroller, and council members, along with liquor board members as well. If one of the collective bargaining units of city government receives a pay increase, cost of living adjustment, in that preceding July. In July 1st of 2021, MAPS received a COLA, a pay increase, which triggered the requirements of state and local law for elected officials to receive their mandated pay increase. And so each elected official would receive a 2.5% pay increase. And again, that's how we got here. In years where Collective bargaining agreements are not reached in a given calendar year, which does happen from time to time, we do not submit the request to note an increase to the elected official's salary per the statute.
Thank you, Director Herbert. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, for the elected officials increase.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, Director Herbert's report will be noted by this board. The next item on the non-routine agenda can be found on pages 99 through 100. Department of Human Resources minimum wage increase. The Maryland state minimum wage increased from $11.75 to $12.50, effective January 1st, 2022. The board is being asked to adjust our salary scales to reflect the increase and also to give agencies additional flexibility to recruit and compensate student employees. On behalf of the Department of Resources, again, we would like to recognize Director Quentin Herbert to present to us on this particular item. Director Herbert, the floor is yours.
Thank you again, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, and distinguished members of the board. Again, this is an action of law. The minimum wage increased in the state of Maryland effective January 1st. When the minimum wage increases, we send these memos to the board for the classifications and the grades, salary grades that we have in city government that begin at the minimum wage, to bring those grades, the pay in those grades up to the appropriate minimum wage. When we do that, we create some compression automatically when we bump those rates up. And so what we do is we look at the range in those grades, and if you'll notice where there's a tight range, we bump the top up a little bit more to address for that compression that happens when we increase the minimum wage. Where there is a more broad range of the salary in the grade, we try to leave the top alone because there's enough room within the grade for employees to matriculate through without seeing that compression that you see when the salaries are more tightly constrained. And so what you see there is that that increase to the top level of some of those salaries, some of those pay ranges where there's a tight pay range, a $2 or $3 difference, to reflect that potential compression that takes place when we increase the minimum wage.
Thank you, Director Herbert. At this point, are there any questions or concerns from members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, the board will entertain a motion.
Again, I'm not sure we need a motion, but to the extent we need to approve, I move.
I second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it, just for precautionary reasons, Mr. Solicitor, but thank you for noting that to us. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of the board for any items that we've discussed today or any additional things to add? Hearing and seeing none, as there's no new business before the desk, the board will reconvene. The board will recess until bid opening at 12 noon. As a reminder, the Board of Estimates has adopted a bi-weekly meeting schedule for 2022, and we will reconvene on Wednesday, January the 19th at 9 a.m. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Baltimore, please stay safe. Please continue to wear your mask, socially distance, and we love you.